Hello. Welcome to another episode of the Draft Nerds podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Matt, back here with another episode. And we are joined here today by a special guest, my friend from across the pond, Mr. James Ogden of Russell Street Report. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, thanks, Matt. Really excited about this. I always been a fan of your work from afar and like checking out your stuff on Twitter. I always see that. I always feel like I agree with you on loads of things, and then I see opinions you post, and I'm like, oh, I hadn't seen a player that way, and then like went back and watched the tape and stuff. So really respect you, man. So it's a privilege to do this.
Same here, sir. I've admired your work from afar as well. Seeing I remember a couple years ago. I don't know if it was last year. It was like 2 years ago. You posted um I think it was you had a full write up of the draft, and it was like a full scouting, um, a prospect guide is what you put up. And I looked through this guide, and I'm like, wow, this is really impressive. One, I know how time consuming that can be, and I know the work it takes to put that much detail and that much thought into each prospect. So kudos to you, man. Love your work. Um, a little bit about Mr. James here. Again, he's from the UK. We're going to get into that as well. 15 years now as a uh, draft scout, evaluating prospects. You also are working with Russell Street Report. You are you say you did a lot of self studying. Um, doing your own reports. So let's talk about that first. Like, how did you get into the draft? What made you start to dive into this world of like doing your own scouting and writing your own reports?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that I didn't being in the UK, like I engaged with the NFL from like when I was a kid and watched the NFL, and then but I didn't know college football existed when I was a teenager. Like, I had no idea. Just thought the NFL was the only American football that got played in the world, and then I went to university to college myself, and I played the sport at college, and it like don't that's not not as impressive as it probably sounds to an American audience. Like it was not a very high standard, and I wasn't very good. So like it's not great. But what we did do was we were quite a reasonably sophisticated offense for what you find in the UK in terms of playing American football. And the thing that I had to watch loads to understand our offense was we played the spread, and so I got loads of tape of old style Texas Tech, Mizzou stuff, and suddenly discovered that college football existed, and it opened up this world to me. And sort of then started to engage with the draft, and then realized that this was something that I really, really kind of enjoyed. And the draft, watched the first draft for the first time when it was first televised in the UK back in 2008. And then from there, I watched it and was like, I want my own opinions on these guys. So started watching prospects and sort of self-taught a little bit through just consuming as much content as I could to try and understand what you should be looking for. And then about 5 years ago, I went and studied at the Scouting Academy just to get, because I wanted to just learn more and do it at a better level, really.
Yeah, so it's so interesting, right? Like to see how much the game has grown overseas, and how so many fans across the world have gravitated um, to the NFL, and how it's now bringing people together that would that otherwise would not meet each other. Like me and you and I would probably never cross paths if it wasn't for the NFL, right? And so that's the beauty of the game being grown and being broadcast in different places, and allowing a place like Twitter, which is a melting pot for all of society, to be able to conversate and connect. And so I do know the Ravens are near and dear to your heart. Tell me
Yeah.
about that. How did you become a Ravens fan? Like in the UK, I get it. There's no team there, so it's like everyone kind of picks their team. How did the Ravens become your team?
Yeah, so I was about 11 years old. I started playing basketball because there was a guy came to my school who was an NBA player at the time, who was from Manchester originally. And it was a guy called John Amici, who played for the Orlando Magic and a few other teams. And he set up his own kind of basketball academy, and I played basketball. I'm not wasn't great, but I really enjoyed it. I loved the sport, and I sort of thought, you know what, why don't I try other American sports? Basketball and ice hockey were quite big in the UK at the time, and so I watched a preview for the NFL in 2000. And at the time, in the other sports I was playing, I played rugby for a long time, and played soccer for a long time. And in those sports, especially rugby, I was a kind of defensive player. And watching the preview show, I saw this team that were supposed to be the greatest defense that had ever played the game. And thought, you know what, I'm gonna follow those guys. And it was an easy team to love following through the season, just because I loved like the physicality and the physical toughness. You know, coming from a rugby background, it really appealed to me the way the sport was played, and it looked so different to the way rugby was played. Rugby's quite a technique sport; it's physical, but like American football is a collision sport rather than anything else. So, and that's very different to rugby. And I just really enjoyed it, and I loved the way the Ravens played. And obviously, they won the Super Bowl that year, so then I had to stick around and take a bit of time to understand the sport over a couple of years. But yeah, I just fell in love with the Ravens, and you know, they took me on a wild ride in that first year, so I was pretty happy to stick with them.
So were you like a big Ray Lewis fan, or
Yeah, I love.
Ravens?
At the time, I obviously sort of loved Ray at the time, but what I really liked, I loved that defensive line. Like I loved
Yeah.
Tony Siragusa, Sam Adams, Michael McCrary. Like loved watching those guys. And obviously, I still, you know, there were guys all over that defense, right, who were just tough guys who loved hitting, and you know, Chris McAllister and Rod Woodson, and like it was just you know, I loved those guys. And then as you start to understand and appreciate more of the nuance of the game, we started to get some other guys who you could appreciate, and obviously Ed Reed came along later, and at that point I was starting to understand more about the game. And so watching him play and Ray play in that defense at the high level they did, and from a processing perspective, was just, yeah, it was they were a great team to watch, to start learning more about the game at that point.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely, man. I remember when I became a Ravens fan, it was 1996. I was 12 years old, and they used to play in a stadium called Memorial Stadium, which was like right up the street from my house. Like I could literally walk to the stadium. And when I first got into football, it was way before that. I was a little kid, and the Ravens didn't exist. My dad was a 49er fan. And so I grew up liking the Niners. My dad also liked the Bulls, so I used to like Jordan. But like the Niners were my team. Deion Sanders was like my favorite player. This is around the time when Deion left Atlanta and went to San Francisco, and he helped them win the Super Bowl. And I remember watching the first Super Bowl that I actually remember watching the entire game was Chargers versus 49ers in the Super Bowl, and the 49ers like demolished the Chargers. Deion Sanders had a great game. Jerry Rice had a great game. And I remember that being my team. And then I remember when thinking, you know, as a kid, like, man, I wish Baltimore had a team. And a few years later, Baltimore did have a team. And I mean, I fell in love with the Ravens immediately. Like, even before they had a name, right? When I remember on the news when they were asking people, like, what should we name the team, right? And they would have people like send in and vote on like 5 different names that they gave. And so just love the history of the franchise and how it became and where it is now. It's just it's a beautiful sight, especially when you think about the Ravens being one of the most premier franchises in all of sports. It's a well-run organization. It's a model of consistency, and that's something that if you're a Raven fan, no matter uh, what your issues are with them, that's something you should be proud of as a Raven fan.
I completely agree, man. It's cool to hear your story. I think The Ravens have just announced recently that they've taken up this global markets program for the NFL, and they now have marketing rights in the UK, and we're sort of talking to them a little bit about what they're going to do in the UK for us. I think they've got some exciting stuff planned, but the thing that's I think most exciting really is that to growing the game, and we've Ravens fans have grown in the UK over the last few years, and I firmly believe that the reason for that is that at the moment the Ravens have the best player in the world, right?
Yeah.
Who transcends the sport. Like there are people that I know in the UK that don't watch the sport, aren't really interested in the sport, but I can get them to watch Lamar Jackson highlights and they can appreciate what he does. Because he's so different, right? And so it's like even without an understanding of the game and an appreciation of the game, you can appreciate what Lamar Jackson does on a football field. So it's a great franchise to support, and it's full, I think, in the UK of fans who are like diehard Ravens fans, and we don't attract very many. I don't think that the franchise attracts many non-diehards like fair weather fans.
Yeah, I agree. You can see that the Ravens were starting to grow their brand overseas. Notice last year Lamar Jackson went over there and he took place. He did some soccer stuff with one of the teams over there, and they were documenting him and following him, and he got to practice. I think he exchanged jerseys with like one of the big time players over there. And when the Ravens played over there last year, they practiced at one of these fields where the soccer team played, and the head coach and John Harbaugh kind of, like they have quite the following over in the UK, and I love to see it. I actually can't wait to get over there to watch a game, because I'm sure it's amazing to see a game over there and watch my favorite team at the same time. Have you been to a game in the UK for the Ravens?
Yeah, so when in 2000, so I went to the very first London game between the Dolphins and the Raiders, which was a very bad game. I think in 2008, 2007, 2008. And then, so lucky enough to see the Ravens twice in the UK. The first one, not so lucky because it was that terrible game against the Jags back, I think it was like 9 years ago now, where it was the Ravens came over like a day before and got absolutely beaten to shreds by the Jacksonville Jaguars, and then was obviously lucky enough to go watch them beat the Titans a couple of years ago, and we had a load of great events that we put on as an official UK Ravens fan group. We had a big event on the Saturday in a big bar before the game, and then we had on the Sunday before the game we had took over a brewery in London near the Tottenham Stadium and had a big sort of Maryland style tailgate before the game, and then the game was great too. So that's been great. But I've been over quite a few times to Baltimore and seen the Ravens in Baltimore and a little bit on the road as well. So I've like been very lucky to be able to go and watch them a few times at least anyway. Oh, you're on mute, Matt.
Oh, my bad. Man, I love that. So what part of the UK are you in?
So I live in the Midlands, which is just basically in the middle. I'm originally from Manchester up in the north, but I live in a city called Nottingham in the Midlands, which is about an hour and a half from London.
Oh, Nottingham. Yeah. Okay. I'm familiar with Nottingham. Okay. Awesome, man. Like, so as you guys can see, like the game is just so global, and like to see someone like yourself who's like all the way across the pond connected, and we're both, cheering for the same team. And then, so how did the relationship with Russell Street come about? How did you end up writing for them?
Yeah, I think so. I basically wanted to. I started putting out some content a few years ago where I started sort of basically just putting some of my draft stuff that I've been doing for 8, 9, 10 years myself, just in my own little world. Started putting it out there and into the world on Twitter, and got picked up sort of by a few people. Michael Crawford was the first guy to sort of notice me and retweet me and push me out there a little bit. And Cole Jackson was really kind as well. And Dev Panchwar, and then Tony Lombardi, who runs Russell Street Report, saw my stuff and just asked me if I wanted to contribute some to Russell Street Report. And so I started writing quite a bit. I wrote the Battle Plan series for a couple of years, which is like a really in-depth preview, schematic preview of the games, which I enjoyed doing for a while. And they've been posting my prospect profiles for a few years now, as well. So that's been really cool. And they've been really, really nice to me over the years. And when I've come over to Baltimore, seen guys and met with people, and that's been great. So, and obviously I also do the UK Ravens podcast, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. UK Ravens podcast. If you have not seen it, check it out. It is a fun watch. All right. So I understand that you are getting ready to put your in-depth analysis of guys and prospects that you think fit best with the Ravens. Have you started that already?
Yeah, so it's coming out. It'll come out on Thursday next week. So I've got little less. I have a reasonably full-on job, so I don't manage to. How many I manage to do usually fluctuates each year, depending on how busy the job is, the day job is, and it's been pretty busy this last year. So it's not as in depth as previous years, but the guide should get you through the first 2 days. For picks that I think are likely to be Ravens picks, looking at sort of a really in-depth, I do like a summary and projection about a player. I give you a comp from Ravens past draft classes for the player. Then I do a full kind of breakdown evaluation and then a projection of how I think the player will fit with the Ravens and what works there. That's probably like a really in-depth report over the course of about 30 players that I think could be the first round pick, and then some less in-depth reports going on for the sort of get you through day 2, specifically looking at how these guys will fit with the Ravens and how it'll work for them. So that's what it'll be. It's about 50,000 words, so it's pretty in-depth. It's a long read, but hopefully it gives people a good indication of what these players are like and how they'll fit with the Ravens.
Awesome, man. I love that. James, can you give me 1 second? I just have to let the little one out. Give me 1 second.
No problem.
All right. And I'm back.
Hey, man.
All right. Yep. All right. Little one is off. At least for right now. So yeah, man. So I love the UK, the connection to the NFL, the UK Ravens. Shout out the UK Ravens. You guys represent, always come in my spaces, always comes in She Talk space. Always say good perception of what it's like to be a Raven fan or just a football fan or American football fan in the UK. What it's like to have a favorite team over there, and to be able to bridge the gap right between fans over there, fans here, and for us to be able to connect and to be able to be from worlds apart, but yet have one thing that we all have in common, which is football, right? Which is the Ravens. So I absolutely love that. So to dive into this year's draft, as it relates to the Ravens, who are some of your favorite players that you've watched or scouted this year that you think would be a good fit for the Ravens?
Yeah, there's quite a few, right? I think within this draft class, I think like if we start sort of high up the board, I think there's a few that that fit well with the Ravens, that are guys I admire, and I think and would be at the top of my list for the Ravens. When they get on the clock at 27, I think, you know, there's for me, there's like a group of a few guys that are the elite prospects in this draft, and then I reckon there'll be on the Ravens board probably about 15 to 20 guys that they'll want to get at 27. There's some where they'll have absolutely no chance, but then there's a few where I think they fit really beautifully with the Ravens and would be right at the top of my board in terms of value. And so that would include guys like Derek Harmon, Jedi Barron, Malachi Starks, Jihad Campbell, Walter Nolan, Shamar Stewart, Donovan Iziraku. These are the guys that I feel like that are like semi-realistic of falling to the Ravens if things fall a certain way, that I think would fit really, really well with the Ravens, and would be right at the top of their board.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish your statement.
No, you go ahead.
No. So I was going to ask you, like, all right, what is your take on the Ravens offseason so far? And then based on that offseason, based on what your thoughts are from the Ravens offseason, which one of those players that you mentioned you think would be the best fit at 27?
Yeah, I think so. The thing with the Ravens, I think so far, is that this offseason tends to suggest to me that they are opening themselves up for a 2 to 3 year run at this. Lamar is about to be at the height. I mean, he already is at the height of his powers, and we don't know what'll happen in the future. You don't know what'll happen with injuries or anything like that. And I think they've got that, like, they're relying on this 2 to 3 year window now where I think they're going to try, and you can see it through some of the things that they've done, the void years that they're adding to contracts, the fact that they spent the money on Ronnie Stanley and didn't go into the draft wanting to try and find a left tackle. They wanted a solid left tackle that's going to play right now, and so spent the money on Ronnie. I think it feels like they're ready, but the problem is they're up against the cap. And so there are in previous years, they've managed to find some money. Marcus Williams, Derrick Henry, they've managed to find some money for some splash signings. That's not going to be the case over the next couple of years. So these drafts are really important to find immediate contributors, guys who are going to come in day one and be a role and play a role for the Ravens, and possibly even more than that. And it's why I think in the end, at the top of my board are two guys that I think are the two that are most hopeful to the Ravens. The first one is Derek Harmon, who I think just looks like a Raven. He's getting a lot of love at the moment in mock drafts and seems to be the guy of choice for the Ravens fan base right now. And that to me just tells you that the Ravens fan base is pretty clued up and understands what they're looking at, because Harmon is an absolute beast. You know, he is a guy who the Ravens will be interested in because of his frame, because of his athletic ability, because of the way he processes the game. He's a really highly intelligent guy, and the little details in his pass rush are the things that are really impressive to me. The way the plan he has as a pass rusher is really impressive. But he's got toughness, he's got versatility. He ticks all of these boxes that the Ravens look for in defenders in general, but especially on the defensive line. I saw him play across the Oregon defensive line with a high degree, like with a high level of responsibility within the scheme. And this game that you just flashed up now against Ohio State, this was one of his best games. And Chip Kelly cooked up a really chaotic running scheme in this game, and Derek Harmon just seemed to know what was coming all of the time, and they found him incredibly difficult to get blocked in this game. And he is a guy who I think if you add him now, he comes into the defensive line and makes a difference immediately as a pass rusher, because that's how skilled he is as a pass rusher. But he can also play the run. He's a complete player. And so what you're doing is, lots of people would want the Ravens to add a really dominant edge rusher. And there might be a guy there at 27 that can turn into that guy. But what you could do by adding Harmon is just add another guy who gets to the passer on the interior, and you create real problems for opposing offenses. And I think he really fits the way the Ravens set their defensive front now, which is pretty creatively. So I'm a big Derek Harmon advocate. I think he would be a great pick at 27. And then the other guy, which I'll let you talk about Harmon if you want, but the other guy I'd want to talk about is Jedi Barron as well.
Yeah. So Derek Harmon, love him, right? I don't know about you. I'd be curious to see what your comp is for him. Who your comp is for him. But for me, matter of fact, who is your comp for him? I want to see if it matches what I'm going to say.
I really struggled with Derek Hartman because I don't think when you start thinking about just so that my comps this year, I really restricted myself because my comps this year were just guys that the Ravens have drafted, not guys that have been on the team. So just guys that the Ravens have drafted. And I couldn't not think of a guy who fit really well for Derek Harmon that the Ravens have drafted. You start thinking about guys that the Ravens have had, and you're like, oh, it could be this guy, but actually he's not quite that. He's not. So
Yeah.
I had to go with a mix. So I was like,
Okay.
if you mix the best bits of Arthur Jones and Brandon Washington,
Like it. Brandon
Brandon
Washington.
Williams, sorry, with you get Derek Harmon. Like he
Yeah.
has the pass rush upside that you got through Arthur Jones, but he also
Mhm.
plays the run with the same level of competency that you saw from Brandon Williams. And so I kind of had to do that mix of a comp for Harmon.
I love it. Actually, my comp for him is Chris Jones. I think when
Yeah,
you look at his ability to play the run and rush the passer equally, that's Chris Jones, right? And
yeah,
when Chris Jones came out, he was he was like the same as far as the way he was uh, coveted, I guess, to coming out of the draft. Like he wasn't like just slam dunk Kate Miss prospect that he turned out to be. He was kind of like Derek Harmon. He was kind of like that guy, no man's land, where people like him, but it doesn't seem like anyone's just like in love with him, especially not the media. And so you don't see this groundswell of attention for him. Meanwhile, he'll land on a team like the Ravens late in the first round, and he'll go on to be a multi-time Pro Bowler. And people will be saying, "Well, how the heck did the Ravens get Derek Harmon in that draft, right?" And it because the Ravens value things that other teams don't. Is the reason why we draft Kyle Hamilton a safety in the first round. It's the same reason why we draft Linda Baum a center in the first round. It's the reason why we go and get Patrick Queen a linebacker in the first round, or we trade for Roquan Smith. Is because we value the things that other people don't, right? We value when everyone's chasing for non-premium positions. And I broke this down in one of my spaces. I broke it down like this. Excuse me. When everyone's chasing after the premium positions, right? Like wide receiver, edge rusher, left tackle, uh, cornerback, right? What that does is it pushes all the non-premium positions down. So instead of like at 27, the Ravens drafting, say, the fourth best edge rusher, right? They're drafting the number one safety. They're drafting the number one defensive tackle. They're drafting the number one center, right? 2022, while everybody was trading up to get the wide receivers in that draft, right? Jameson Williams and Chris Olave, and you're talking about Drake London, and all of those guys who went in that top half of that first, right? Johan Dotson, all those receivers got pushed up. Even Treylon Burks got picked up high because the Titans traded AJ Brown. So all of those players got pushed up. And a guy like Tyler Linderbaum, who's now a perennial All Pro, was just sitting there in the back half of the first round. And it's because he plays center. It's the same reason why in every mock draft leading up to that draft, oh wait, take this. Yeah. It's the reason why. It's the same reason why um every the mock draft leading up to, I think it was a 23 class, where um Brian Branch was mocked in the first round of every draft in every mock draft during that time, right? And then all of a sudden Brian Branch falls to the second round to Detroit. Right, and everybody's sitting there. How did Detroit get Brian Branch in the second round? It's because he plays a non-premium position, and everyone is chasing after the premium. And so the Ravens get the chance to pick the highest player on the board at that non-premium position because everyone else is like trading up for quarterbacks, wide receivers, and edge rushers and left tackles. That a center falls, or a top guard falls, or a top safety falls, or like last year they just kind of let the board fall because there was this groundswell of offensive players last year. You had 5 quarterbacks, I believe, that went in the top half, right? I think it was McCarthy, it was Bo Nix, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, and Caleb Williams, right? We got 5 quarterbacks. Then I think we had 3 or 4 receivers. I think it was Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., Brian Thomas Jr., and then you also get the tight end Brock Bowers, right? So look at that many offensive players getting picked that high. It naturally pushes down the defensive players, and then you get a Nate Wiggins at 30 when every mock would have told you no way you're getting Nate Wiggins at 30, right? Even though I did project Nate Wiggins to the Ravens at 30, a lot of people wouldn't have saw that. They wouldn't have seen that happening, right? I kind of know how boards shift, and I know how teams like to pick and how the board may go, which is why I'm pretty good at picking the Ravens pick. But most people would have said, "Nah, there's no way." Like I didn't pick Kyle Hamilton falling to the Ravens. He was supposed to be a top 5 pick, but based on positional value is how the Ravens end up with such great value at non-premium positions. And so this is how they do so. And then to your point, I think Michael Pierce is a bigger loss than we've actually talked about. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the Ravens are going to have to address that at some point. But the thing with Michael Pierce that I think people don't, that sort of people underestimate is that the amount of wiggle he had for a big man, like the movement skills that he had for a big man is rare. And so you do losing that is a thing for the Ravens. I think they are going to have to replace that in some way. I don't know that it's necessarily going to be someone like a Derek Harmon, but I think there are going to be other guys that they can look at as they move through this draft class. But picking up a guy like Harmon, the challenge at the moment is the defensive line depth is a bit thin, and so you're looking at 3 really good ascending defensive linemen. Obviously, Madubuike already sort of where he is, but I like Travis Jones and I like what Broderick Washington brings to the table as well. But that's kind of it. There's not a lot else outside of that in terms of the depth, and you need more bodies on the defensive line. And I think the thing that sort of there's lots of people talking about the Eagles and the stable of pass rushes they have that was able to help them win the Super Bowl. The thing I look at in with that Eagles team is the amount of times I saw Jalen Carter wreck games for them, and give that stable of pass rushers the opportunity to make plays. I think that's the way in which you can find the value that you were just talking about drafting the top guy at the position. The Ravens took Kyle Hamilton, the top safety the top player at that position at safety, and then had a plan for him to do other things, had a plan for him to have a much more of an impact from a defensive standpoint than just a split safety in a traditional role. And I think you can do that with Derek Harmon. The thing that's showing up on here now that I think is the thing that I love most about Harmon is I mentioned the sort of details in his pass rush, like the way in which he, I was taught to evaluate a rush plan in the same way that you evaluate a pitch mix in baseball, that you are looking for a guy who, knows how to keep people off his strikeout pitch, knows himself, knows what he's doing. And the thing that I love about Harmon, to continue in the analogy, is that the way he rushes the passer, he's got really consistent power in his hands, and the thing he uses the most is a club rip move that's very effective.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But what he also has is some other moves that he can use that look really similar to the club rip move as far as the offensive lineman is concerned. Mm-hmm. And so he has a counter club that's really impressive. He's got like this pull slide move that can be really subtle, and it looks very similar to the way he sort of approaches the offensive lineman to run that club rip. And it's a real challenge for an offensive lineman from a processing standpoint to understand how to prevent yourself from being turned against that type of sophisticated pass rush. And so the thing I think about Harmon is it's those little details in his game that are so impressive that I always worry about being a bit arrogant and sort of saying that, like, I know more than NFL teams, but I think it's been proven over a number of years that there are some NFL front offices that will miss those details and won't see that type of thing, and he will get underdrafted he will get down some boards by some teams because they don't notice those things.
You know what, James? I don't think it's arrogance. I think it's okay to acknowledge when you do know something, because I mean, we see some of these guys, these GMs and these scouts. They'll tell you, like, when they say stuff like, "Oh, we're learning from like Madden on how they evaluate play."
Yeah,
Like that tells you they really don't know. Like no one has all the answers, right? And
yeah,
I think we all have a little bit of the answers. We all know a little bit of the truth, and I think if we bring everybody together, you create a consensus, and then you'll get exactly what the truth is. But I think um, one of the things someone told me is that always surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, right?
yeah,
That way, if you're the smartest guy in the room, you have no one there to challenge your thoughts, right? And so, how do you get better if there's no one there to challenge your way of thinking? The problem is these GMs surround themselves with yes men and people who don't challenge their way of thinking and their thoughts, and therefore they continue to make these catastrophic. Sorry, they continue to make these catastrophic mistakes in the evaluation of players that someone like yourself or me might look and say, how does this continue to happen? How does this team continue to miss on player after player after player? Meanwhile, a team like the Ravens, a team like the Steelers, who are consistently picking at the bottom of the draft every year, they still find diamonds. They still finding all pros and Pro Bowl players. And so it shows you, like, having a hot pick means nothing if you don't have the right people evaluating the talent, because you can
yeah,
miss up high the same way you can miss down low. And I think there's a huge opportunity right now in the scouting community that I think teams really need to reach out and find these people who, like us, who we spend a lot of our own personal time scouting because we love it, right? No one,
yeah,
we love to do this. And because, so whenever you're doing something you love to do, it's not work, and
yeah,
you're passionate about it. And because you're passionate about it, I think the result shows, right? And
yeah,
I just think that when you see these teams miss, it's because they're overthinking it. Like you're seeing it so far this year in this draft. Like I'm seeing Ted McMillan dropping to like 29, and I'm like, that's classic overthink. Kyle Hamilton falling out of the top five. You're overthinking it. You're sitting there saying, I see a guy who's 6'4", unbelievable wingspan, can cover every part of the field, can tackle, can do everything. But I'm not going to draft him because he's a safety. Like, you're so focused on the position and not the player, right? It's like my guy Bill always tells me, it's always scout the player, not the helmet, right? Because we get caught up in that too. Like, oh, I like him, but he played for that school, right? Focus on the player, not the helmet. Even though there are some schools that have a profile when it comes to certain players. And so I always thought it was interesting to see how these teams continue to miss and what the philosophy is. So you mentioned another player. I think did you mention Jade Barron?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. So what's your thoughts on him? And do you think this is a year the Ravens need to be more aggressive? So I just broke down their philosophy, which is they say when everyone else zags, right? They draft the non-premium position over the premium position. But do you think this is a year that needs to change?
Yeah, I think so. In some ways, I think the challenge, right, is that at corner it feels light right now, and the reason being is the Ravens push even when you had Kyle Hamilton in that freer role in the first half of the season, they were playing Marlon Humphrey in the slot more than they were in previous years, and I think they want to get him inside more than they have done in previous years. And so I think they need an outside corner. Now, Chidobe Awuzie, I think he's fine and will be able to hold down a spot, but they really probably want a higher level of play out of that the other corner position. And I also don't think, we've seen over recent years teams have success while using two young corners. And so I don't think it's a problem to have Nate Wiggins on one side and another young draftee on the other side. Jade Barron, I try deliberately not to read anything until I watch a player because I don't like to have my viewpoint colored, but it was quite hard not to find some reference to Barron it was hard not to come across some reference to Barron as a guy who is going to play, who's going to play nickel, is going to play the slot,
Yeah.
and it was really quite easy to find people also like hard to avoid people talking about his arm length uh, as a real struggle for him. But I think he's going to be a real classic case of a guy who probably is going to get underdrafted. We've seen countless examples of that happen. But for me, he's a classic study in a guy who is missing some length, plays a lot of zone, played a lot of zone at Texas, and he's rarely up in a big receiver's face at the line of scrimmage. But there are other corners who have fit that profile who've gone on and been criminally underrated who have the same traits that he does that show up on film consistently. And the Ravens draft comp I had for him was Ladarius Webb, which is not the best comp. It's good, but it's the best comp I think for him is Trent McDuffie. That's who I see on film. And I think the reason being, when you have the short arms that Barron and McDuffie have, what you have to have is elite ball skills. And when I say ball skills, I don't just mean intercepting the football. I mean accuracy and timing when you are trying to break up the pass. And that is what Barron has. His ball skills, I feel, are at an elite level, which is what McDuffie's were as well. And so the arm length doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that he's got a couple of inches shorter arms than you'd want, because he's always on time and he's always accurate when his receiver's targeted. He's one of the easiest movers I've seen on film. Like, all his transitions are fluid. He excels at the most important thing a cornerback can do, which is taking away a target on any given play for the quarterback. And the other thing about him is the way he processes the game. I just think he's one step ahead of every other player on the field because of how quickly he reads the game. I think he steps in as a starter on day one. I think you're gonna. Like, I have seen him struggle a little bit against elite play strength, and so you're gonna have to think about how you deploy him against the likes of Jamar Chase in the AFC North. If you're going to have to ask him to press with a jam against a guy like Chase. But I'm not worried about that. I think that the thing about it for me is that I think he can play inside. I think he can play outside. I'm pretty sure I would project him as an outside corner that could also play a bit of inside. And so you get a situation there where he and Marlon Humphrey can actually play in tandem a little bit. And they can slowly make that transition for Humphrey, because you can play Barron inside and out. So I'm a really big fan of Jahdae Barron, and I think I'm going to be really surprised if he's there at 27. Plays a premium position. The only thing is the arm length, and there'll be some NFL teams who have those red line minimums on arm length for corners. That'll mean he falls a bit. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I really like the kid.
I would be shocked if Jahdae Barron is there at 27. I mean, I'll be completely shocked because, well, I was going to say this. I'll be shocked but not surprised, only because he shouldn't be there. That's why I'll be shocked. But the surprise wouldn't be, because, I mean, we watched Nate Wiggins and Quinyon Mitchell both fall to around this spot last year.
Yeah.
Excuse me. If I'm not mistaken, I think Quinyon went at 27.
Yeah, I think
27, he did, and Nate went at pick 30, and then Cooper DeJean didn't even go in the first round at all after he was mocked in the first round the entire pre-draft process. So if he is there at 27, it'll be because of his height and because of his arm length, and Ravens will be more than happy to snatch him up and make him a Raven. I do agree with you. He has the versatility to play in tandem with Marlon Humphrey. So when you do play a team like the Bengals, who have the bigger trees on the outside, you can move Jahdae in the slot and to play that matchup game. You also have the safeties and Kyle Hamilton and Darius Washington for this year to be able to help out when we may have a mismatch, so to speak, where Jahdae's matched up on a bigger receiver. You do have the 6'4" safety to kind of help out. I also think they're going to draft a safety this year, so I think back to that 3 safety look where they can move Kyle around more and put him more closer to the line of scrimmage where he can make more plays. So I think that like Jahdae absolutely reminds me of Trent McDuffie. Like, that's my comp for him. straight ball skills, straight skill, speed. I can't remember what his 40 was. I think he ran 4.27 or 4.3. Unbelievable athlete. I think he'd be a slam dunk pick. So my other part of the question was, do you think this is the year the Ravens need to be more aggressive?
I think so. That's how I feel about it. I don't know that they will. I think there's they run so much scenario planning and working out how this works. I was lucky enough last year to get to go to the castle to record a podcast and got a bit of a tour and spoke to some people, and like I think you can tell that the depth of thinking that goes into it, and I think if you play out enough scenarios, you can see that someone falls to them. And I think they prize draft picks so much that I'd be surprised if they trade up. I think there's a lot of people sort of saying they're not going to make all of the picks. I do see a path where they do make all of the picks. It's happened before when we thought that they would get rid of some, they would get rid of some to trade up. I think this is an interesting draft where you don't want to get stuck with the last guy that falls to you. I think you want to get one of these. There is a little bit of a tier. There is a tiny tier break around sort of like 15 to 20 in that range. And so there's a real chance that all of those guys go. And then there's some really great fallback options for the Ravens, I think, in the first round, specifically on the offensive line, that they could pick up if they get in trouble. But I would, if I was Eric DeCosta, I would be giving serious consideration to a scenario where one of those more premium talents drops and you've got the only one left on the board and you try and get aggressive and get up for them. I really, really, I mean, they got Nate Wiggins, so it's fine, but I really was last year. They didn't really have as much ammunition, but I was screaming for them to go up and get Quignon as he was falling. I couldn't believe that he was falling as far as he was. And that would have been a great move, but obviously it worked out anyway. But I think that's the thing this year. I can see a situation where there is someone who falls a bit and you're sort of lost. You've lost the rest of the board there, and you could sit there and say, actually, we're okay. We're going to wait and we're going to pick up a Gray Zabel or a Donovan Jackson or someone like that. That's a kind of fallback option. But actually, there's a chance that we could go up and get a Derek Harmon because he's falling. So I think that's the thing that I would say. I don't know about you.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder with the guard position. My question to you is, how you feel about that position? With Falele and now Voorhees, do you feel stable in that position, or do you think the Ravens need an upgrade?
No, I don't feel stable in that position. Falele showed me enough down the stretch that he would be the incumbent in camp, but that it's not his job. He's going to have to earn it again. He seemed to get some confidence down the stretch and did better, but there's still a challenge with him. So I feel like they are going to have to put some competition in that room. Voorhees, showed us something at left guard when he played, and I think there's potential there. But I think with both Voorhees and Falele, you're looking at guys who are not necessarily the guy, and so I think they have to put competition in that room, and I think they have to put serious competition in that room. Like in previous years, they have waited to the third, fourth round to pick these interior offensive linemen, and it feels to me, I put a tweet out a few weeks ago that I'm begging them to pick an interior offensive lineman in the second or third round, because it feels like every year I have these guys who I'm like, this guy's going to be great. I really want the Ravens to shore up the interior offensive line with a slightly more premium pick, and they never do it. And then they bring in a developmental guy, and that guy eventually gets to a point where they're a serviceable starter. But I think this year it feels like it's the right time to take a guy, and maybe they don't do it. Maybe they don't pull the trigger in the first round, and they don't feel it's that high a need or the value is there. But I do think there's going to be options for them, and I think there's a good chance that Zabel, Donovan Jackson, and Tyler Booker are all there for them when they pick, and all of they're all interesting conversations in different ways about how they fit with the Ravens. But I think it's something that they should be thinking about.
Absolutely. I love Donovan Jackson, man. Like, not so much Booker. Booker, I feel like he's just a guard only. And I feel like the
Yeah.
Ravens need someone in that first round that has some position versatility. Donovan Jackson proved last year that he could play left tackle. I mean, he was dominant in the playoff run for Ohio State last year down the stretch to that national championship. I mean, he didn't give up any pressures and then no sacks. And that's incredible for a guy who, again, right as you see, he started off as a left guard. Then Josh Simmons goes down and he smooths over the left tackle, and it's like seamless. The old line coach at Ohio State talked about how they felt like nothing happened, like it was just seamless. They transitioned to Donovan over to the left side, and they just kept going. Derek Harmon spoke at the combine, and they asked him who was the toughest matchup for him this year, and he said Donovan Jackson.
Yeah.
Donovan Jackson is one of the most undervalued players in this draft. I feel like I've seen a couple of mocks of him in the first round, but not enough. I've seen him mocked to the Ravens several times. I believe I saw a mock yesterday. Can't remember who it was from, and they had Donovan Jackson go to the Ravens. But for the most part, these are the three players that's been mocked to the Ravens: Donovan Jackson, Derek Harmon, Malachi Starks. Those are the three guys that's been consistently mocked. Tom McShay just put out his mock today. He has the Ravens taking Derek Harmon. Mel Kiper put out his final mock. He has Ravens taking Malachi Starks. Donovan Jackson. Like, those are the guys, right? I feel like it'll probably be, if they stick and pick. I've mocked Malachi Starks to the Ravens like 3 months ago, right? When people said, "Oh, no way, he won't even be there," and I'm like, okay, I know position versatility. I know. Listen, I understand positional value, right? So while Malachi Stark shouldn't be there based on talent, he will be there based on his position.
Yeah.
And because this draft is loaded at other positions where people are going to be clamoring to get, right? So let's just break it down by the numbers. You're going to probably have, before the Ravens pick, you're probably going to have at least 2 quarterbacks taken, maybe 3, right? Because I can see Shedeur, Cam Ward, and Jackson Dart all getting picked before 27. You're going to have 2 running backs, Omarion Hampton and Ashton Genty are going to go, right? So what's that? 5 players right there, right? Then we're going to have the stars of the draft, which I call Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, Cam Ward, right? Those are the 3 stars or whatever, right? Cam Ward fits in the quarterback, so that's 3 with the quarterbacks. That's 2 with the running backs. And then you have Travis Hunter is going to go. You're going to have the 2 tight ends, and Warren and Loveland are going to go. You're going to have Will Johnson is going to go. You're going to have at least 3 tackles, maybe more, with Will Campbell, with maybe Josh Simmons, with Armand Mimbo. Yep, Armand Mimbo. You're going to probably have at least 1 wide receiver in Ted McMillan. You're going to have multiple pass rushers in Mike Green. Probably, if you put Jalen Walker in that class, Jahad Campbell. And then you're going to also have maybe James Pierce Jr. as well. And then Jahdae Barron is probably going to go in there probably after Will Johnson, maybe even before Will Johnson. So the way I've been looking at it, Donovan Azaruku could end up going before. The Ravens are going to have their pick of the litter at 27. It just seems like it's just inevitable. We're going to get that 27, and it's going to be 6 players that the Ravens all love. Donovan Jackson may be there. Malachi Starks may be there. Nick Warray may be there. Maybe a receiver like Luther Burden is there. Maybe a pass rusher Like Azaruku is there. Maybe James Pierce is there. Derek Harmon may also be there. Like in that case, would you trade down? I know they don't really need more picks because they have 11. I can't foresee. I can't even foresee 11 players making the team, not alone 12 or 13. But do you think they trade down in that scenario, or do you think they probably just try to trade up to get a better player in that scenario?
Yeah, I think this is the thing we were talking about, wasn't it? That like you really do see a scenario where the Ravens do have their pick of the litter, which is why trading up doesn't feel like the thing that they normally do. Like they always talk about like waiting, and they'll go up if there's one guy left in a tier, and then but if not, they'll sit and wait. So it does feel like they'll sit and wait. Trade back would be an option. I think in this draft, the thing I would want them to do with a trade back would probably be not just a straight pick coming in for that trade. Like I'd want them to be doing something that gets them up from some of those picks in the fourth round into the third round, where I think there's going to be talent. So I'd want them to be a reciprocal trade up in a sort of into day two to make sure that they then potentially have 3 or 4 day 2 picks depending on how it goes. And so that's what I'd be looking for them to do if they were going to trade back in that scenario. There's definitely a chance that they will, and like you just played it out with the names. Like any way you slice it, there's a real chance that there's going to be a group of guys that they're going to be rating highly that are going to be there for them. And that's before you even think about the prospect of guys like Jihad Campbell sliding. Like he's just had the surgery for a torn labrum. Like and he's a linebacker, so there's a chance that guy drops, and you know he would be for me on the same level as Starks in terms of the like position, in terms of the value that you would get for drafting a guy like that. Maybe not in a premium position again, but and it would feel like a bit of a luxury pick to put him next to Roquan Smith. But I think it's the same situation as with Kyle Hamilton, where you just get a great football player and you find a role for him where he can make a real impact on the team, on the defense. So that's the thing I think for me is it really does feel like they will stick and pick at 27 because they'll have so many options to do so.
Man, listen, if Jihad Campbell fell, I think it would work from this standpoint. Jihad can rush the pass off the edge as well. And people forget about this, but so can Trent Simpson. And when Trent Simpson was at Clemson, he played every position on defense. Like there was one year where he was an edge rusher. There was one year where he was a nickel corner. There was a year where he played safety. He only played off-ball linebacker for 1 year, and that was the year before he got drafted. Like adding a Jihad Campbell or Jalen Walker, all it does is give you another chess piece to be able to utilize in tandem with Trenton Simpson to be able to mix and match and have one guy rushing here, one guy playing off, and you can swap them out the same way you would do Jahdae Barron and Marlon Humphrey. So to me, there's so many different options for the Ravens. It's really juicy and exciting. So as we sit here today, well, before we get to that, give me a round 3 gem, someone that you think would be a steal for the Ravens. Let's start.
Yeah. The tough thing, right, with this draft is that I don't know who's going to go in round 3. Like, I think they're going to be teams are going to be all over the board on these guys. And so there's a number of guys that could be round 2 guys, but they could be round 3 guys depending on how people see them. The guy I think I want to talk about that I think is definitely a round 3. Like I could talk about some guys I like Jordan Birch or Benjamin Morrison, but I think some of these guys are gonna they have a great chance of going in the second. So the guy I would want to talk about that I think will definitely be a 3rd round pick because he's really weird is Ashton Jalati out of Louisville, who is a really weird edge rusher. Like he's a weird shape when you look at him, and he's 6'2", but he's 264 pounds. So he's quite thick, and he plays with a lot of play strength. And the 6'2" actually really helps him because he plays with real leverage all the time. So he's always maximizing his play strength. The thing I think with him is, I think he's a great example of a guy who Um, he's playing that role in that you see now in college, where they're asking guys that are shaped like him, who are really an edge rusher. They're a 7 technique. They are, or a 9 or a wide 9. They're asking him to play 4-eye all the time when
Yeah.
they're playing the 3-4-3 defense,
Yeah.
and it just doesn't suit him. It doesn't suit his game as a pass rusher. What's amazing when you watch him actually is that he will hold his own on the interior when he's
Yeah.
playing the run, because he plays with such great play strength. He's got great technique with his hands. But then what you can see is there is some pass rush there from him. Like I think he has, when he's aligned further outside and he can maximize the athleticism he has, because the guy is very athletic. Like
Oh yeah.
I think
Yeah.
he ran a 4.65 40. He had a really great 10 split, I think, if I remember correctly. And he
Yeah.
had some explosive jumps as well. So the guy's
I think he
athletic.
surprises people with his athleticism. I think he surprises
He does,
like tackles when they're going up against him. I don't think they expect him to be so nimble and so quick for his
I,
size.
I completely agree. And I think the thing for me is that he's a guy who, I feel like in a different scheme you would see him with a lot more sacks and a bit more love in this process. And I think you've got a chance there to get a guy in the building and put him a role that suits him more and get more production out of him. And so I think I think with him there's a real chance that you could get him in the building and just teach him how to, because at the moment he's had so little opportunity to use his athleticism as much as he could in college. I think you get him in the building, you put him in a role where he can actually use that athleticism a bit more. He's going to start to learn how he can put moves with his hands and how he can set up and have his rush plan work. So I think there's a real chance with him that you get a bit of a steal and a bit of a gem. And I think he probably will be a 3rd round pick just because of, like I said, because of how weirdly shaped he is, the lack of production, and the different things. So
Yeah, absolutely. What player from the last year's draft, the 2025 class, do you think will have the biggest jump this year?
that's a really good question. I expect, I do expect Nate Wiggins to have a big jump next year.
Yeah.
I think what I saw from him this season was a guy who was what I expected him to be. Like I think there were things that I thought he needed. Like you've got a guy who's running a 4.2, and he's a long guy playing corner. He should be a top 10 pick, and there were reasons why he wasn't a top 10 pick, and that was because of some of the technique in his transitions, and some of the run support that he had in college. And I think what I saw was I saw some good improvement on those things over the course of his rookie year, and I've seen some tape of him working out in the off season, which is really encouraging to see. I expect him to take another step next year, into being a top end corner. I think the thing for me is the Ravens clearly look for the X factor in all of this stuff that we do in terms of evaluating players is we don't know how they're going to progress and develop over the course of their careers, and what is their growth mindset like. How are they put together? Are they actually going to do the work to be able to develop the things that they need to develop against? And I think with what you can see it on film a bit during college, but once they get in the league, you can really see how much is this guy going to improve over the course of a year. And the highlights you're showing now of him show like there are definitely things that he worked on and has developed since he's come into the league, and now he's a professional. You're starting to see that development over the course of that year. So I can see a trajectory for him where I can see it getting much better, and I think he's going to be a crucial piece for the Ravens in this Super Bowl window that they seem to be trying to open up for themselves.
Oh, absolutely. I think Nate's my guy, man. Love Nate. Nate he was the perfect pick. He might not have been the pick originally that Ravens fans wanted before the draft, but he is that player that we needed so bad. We needed another lockdown corner on the outside. Marlon is getting a little up there in age, and also we needed just like that A1 corner, right? Like that was when you look at all the Ravens Super Bowl years, they had that A+ lockdown corner. 2000, they had Chris McAllister and Dwayne Starks. 2012, they had Jimmy Smith, who was he was only a second year player. Um, and they had some other guys, but Jimmy was like really that guy, right? Darius Webb was there, but he got hurt before the Super Bowl, right? He got hurt during I think the regular season or something like that. But
Yeah.
they've always had legit corners when they were at their best. The unfortunate part about Nate Wiggins' rookie season, which was great, was that we had so many issues on the back end with the safeties.
Yeah.
It didn't even allow Nate to be at his best. He could have been even better than he was last year, because he could have played even more free, knowing that he has the safety help and everything, and the communication breakdowns wasn't happening. Once they put Kyle and Darius back there, you saw the level of quality of play go up. Now that he has another season to get his NFL body and to be able to be in the system, and another year of his coach, Zach Orr, having more experience as a coordinator and knowing how to utilize these guys, I think it's going to go a long way into to the Ravens getting where they need to go.
I think so too, and I think the thing for me was that I wasn't the rest of the draft class. I wasn't as high on. I think Roger Rosengarten. I think we got the development that you're going to see. I think you're going to see the steepest development curve for him through his first year. I think it'll level off a little bit now, and I think he's going to be a solid offensive tackle. But I don't think we're necessarily going to see, a huge ceiling for him. I think he's going to be a solid starter in the league for a long time, and that's where he sort of got to over the course of his rookie year. I think the other picks that. I'm not the biggest Tez Walker guy, and so I don't see him. Maybe he'll develop a little bit more into a guy that you see a bit more regularly downfield. And when I say regularly catching balls downfield, I mean like one a game maximum. I don't necessarily see a future for him where he's going to be the starting X receiver for the Ravens. There's a chance that Adisa Isaac gets in Chuck Smith's pass rush school and continues to develop. We sometimes see that leap in a second year from those type of guys. But so for me, that's the reason why I think Wiggins is the most exciting from a developmental perspective out of that draft class, really.
Oh man, I loved Roger Rosengarten. I thought Roger was a slam dunk still. I would have taken Roger probably at 30. That's how high I was on Roger. And for us to get him at the back half of the second round, I thought that was an absolute steal. What people didn't know when I scouted him, a lot of casual people didn't know, was that Roger Rosengarten was the blindside protector at Washington, University of Washington. He was Michael Penix's blindside protector. Yeah. Before Penix transferred there, he was the left tackle. They moved him to the right side when Penix got there because Penix was left-handed. He actually cleared this up. I think he was on the podcast with Ryan Mink and Garrett Downing. He talked about how his coaches, when Penix transferred there, the coaches came to him and asked him, would he be willing to transfer? I mean, would he be willing to go over to the right side? He said, sure. But he's always been a left tackle his whole career. The thing is now he's only played right tackle 2 years. His last year at Washington and his first year with the Ravens. He's only going to get better at that position. And you see he got better last season as the season went on. So I'm really excited about him. I'm excited about TJ. I think we've all forgot about TJ a little bit. Somebody, Jay Will 501 says, I hope we get a chance to see TJ Tampa. His length is something that really shows up. And then also he's a really good zone corner, and we run a lot of zone coverage, a lot of cover 3, things like that. So I think he fit well into what we want to do. So I'm excited to see what he can do, especially with the new coaches we brought in. Well, I think we brought a secondary coach in from Kansas City. We brought in Chuck Pagano to be like a senior secondary coach. And then they brought in some other guys that are a lot more experienced than the guys we had last year. So it'll be exciting. So let's see. So Huddle Up Film says Barron just seems like he fit with Marlowe and Nate perfectly. Different skill set, and he's a damn good tackler. He says they can play in tandem. Him and Marlowe can play off each other's skill set. So, two things to end it here. One, what's your gut feeling telling you? Right now, it's April 10th. We're less than 2 weeks away. 27th pick. The Ravens select who?
I think my gut is it's a tough one because, as we talked about, like you just don't know who's going to fall. But I think my gut at this point says Malachi Starks. I think is the most likely pick. I just think the Harmon and Barron dream is just that. I think it's a dream that they get to the Ravens at 27. There's a better chance with Harmon, but I still think someone's going to fall in love and he's going to be gone. And
you got me excited about Harmon now, man. Jeez. I'm all like juiced up about Harmon, and now like he's not coming.
Yeah, I just feel like someone's gonna fall in love before the Ravens and he'll be gone. But I think Starks is a real good chance that he gets there. I think he's a hell of a a heck of a football player. He's a guy who is an interesting fit, I think, with the Ravens defense. Like I think that when they did the when they were running the defense at the start of the year, they really tried to make Marcus Williams and Eddie Jackson happen. Like they really wanted to have Marcus Williams play in that role where they could do some more creative things, but they could drop him into the deep post and rotate coverage and do some things. And I think they really do want that type of safety. And I don't think that Malachi Starks is that. Like I think he's more than that is the thing. I think with Starks, I think he's a guy who's a real versatile weapon that you can use. And so I think what you would end up doing is they would draft him and put him in the role that Kyle Hamilton played down the stretch last year in the second half of the season, and then free Hamilton up to play more of his 2023 type role. And so then you've got Starks and Ardarius Washington playing most of the split field safety roles, and then you've got Hamilton able to move around. And I think he'd excel in that role. I think he's a special. I think he's a really special football player, and I think there's a real chance that he's going to be available and that he's going to be high on the Ravens board. The only caveat I would throw in with him is that he is not the type of athlete that Eric DeCosta has been drafting in the first 2 rounds since he's become GM. He would be a bit of an outlier from an athletics testing perspective. Now, that's not to say he's not an above average athlete. He is, and he's plenty fast. But in terms of the overall athletic profile, he's not quite what Eric DeCosta normally hits on in the first 2 rounds. So maybe there's a chance that he would be lower down. But it's a small sample size for DeCosta. He's not been in charge for that long. So maybe there's outliers to come. So that's where I am, I think.
Yeah. So I mean, based on how Eric DeCosta sees things, Nick Manwari would be more of his preference because he loves gym rats. Like he loves guys who just look like they were made in a lab. But Malachi Starks feels like BPA, doesn't it? Feels like
really
first player.
How do you feel about Manwari?
I'm glad you asked me that because I was going to ask you that earlier. Mixed reviews on Manwari. I love the physical upside. Love the athlete. When I watch the film, I see a lot of second guessing, third guessing. I see a lot of indecision. I see a lot of lost. I see an athlete trying to play football instead of like a football player, right? I see a guy who just he hasn't figured out the mental part of the game yet. So he's just all athletic ability.
I'm completely with you. And I think that mental side of the game translates to that indecision that you've seen, but I also think it translates into lots of areas of his game. Like I think you're gonna have challenges with him as an open field tackler because of the way he doesn't process the game quickly and doesn't create angles for himself as well as he could. I think you mentioned the coaches before, like the new coaching additions, maybe they feel like they can get him in and coach him up and really unlock a ceiling. But for me, I'm with you right now. I think like he's not he doesn't process the game at a high enough level. And I also think some of his transitions can be a little bit messy at times. So I think that indecision is a thing that worries me, and is a thing that for me has him further down the board and not necessarily a value at 27 for me.
Yeah, same. It feels like we be drafting Owe again, you know?
Yeah, I think that's the
It
thing.
feels like we be drafting Owe again.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It would be a project, and one that they don't have to do. Like, they don't have to make that decision. Like, they don't have to take a guy like he's a safe. Like, Owe was interesting, was it? Because he's an edge rusher. You sort of and an edge rusher with those kind of traits falls you at the bottom of the first round. It's you can talk yourself into it. You don't need to do it with Iman Wari. Like. And so I think, and you're also, you've already got that athletic freak with the length and size in Kyle Hamilton. So, and Kyle Hamilton processes the game at a far higher level than Nick Iman-Wari does. So.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Like, the Ravens are in a Super Bowl window, and I feel like they need. They got 11 picks, but if they can come out of this draft with 4 or 5, just like difference makers. That would be what it takes. That would be what we need to get to the Super Bowl. I don't think having just 11 guys, like just guys, like I think they need difference makers. And Matt Warrior is a difference maker from a physical standpoint, but he's going to take 2 or 3 years to develop.
Yeah.
James Pierce is another guy where unbelievable physical traits, but he doesn't sometimes show a high IQ as a football player. He has 1 pass rush move. He's too finesse for a guy his size. I mean, you're a big, freakish guy. Like, you should have more than just finesse moves, you know? So I feel like Starks, even though Makuba's my favorite safety in this draft. Love Andrew Makuba. Yeah, love Andrew Makuba. But I feel like Starks, Jackson, or Harmon will probably be the pick that I would be most happy about.
Yeah, I would.
Okay, go. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say I agree.
What was your thoughts on DeAndre Hopkins signing with the Ravens?
I thought that was really nice. Like, I think the Ravens really needed that extra body in the receiver room, and to get a guy like Hopkins at the price they got him for, I think some of the underlying metrics from last year show you that he's a guy that still has plenty left in the tank. He's not going to be the guy that everybody remembers from earlier in his career, but I think the thing I posted was the thing I really liked about it was that I write in my introduction to the draft guide that the thing that sort of went through my head a bit in the when Mark Andrews dropped that pass in the playoffs was John Wooden's quote about being at your best when your best is required. And that drop from Andrews in the playoffs epitomized his career in the playoffs, but also sort of epitomized some of the failings of this team in the playoffs in recent years, where they have not quite been at their best when their best was required. And DeAndre Hopkins is a tone setter from that perspective. Like, this guy has one drop in the playoffs in his entire career, and I think he's had, I can't remember how many targets he's had. He's had a lot of targets in the playoffs in his career, and he's dropped 1 pass. So for me, he's like, that's what you're looking for there. What he does do is probably take wide receiver off the board for the Ravens early on, which is ironic because I'm a big Luther Burden guy, and
me too. I love it.
And there's a real chance that he's going to be there at 27.
I know, man. It's so crazy.
It's like, I don't understand. Like, he's the type of receiver you're not gonna you do not get that type of upside in a receiver at 27 very, very often, and he's going to be there because of how criminally misused he was in that Mizzou offense. You can just see a path for him being I think he could be a number 1 in the league, to be honest, but that's a little bit further away. But I think there's a real, like, he's great and he's quite high on my board. But there'd be this really awkward discussion if I was running the draft, where you'd be sort of saying, well, how does how do we get impact out of this guy in year one and maybe even in year two, when we've got the room we've got already. So it's an odd one, that given that the Ravens have been wanting receivers of that caliber to fall to them for years and years, and then this guy probably will.
I was gonna say, man, it's like almost cruel, right? Because for years when we wanted a receiver to fall, they never do. And now in the year we're like, no, we don't really need a receiver. There's probably going to be a really good one there. The thing is, though, receiver is a sneaky important need because D-Hop is on a 1-year deal. Bateman is a free agent next year as well. Zay Flowers is up for an extension this year because he's already had 3 years in the league. Tyler Wallace is on a 1-year contract. And Tez Walker, you don't know what you got there. So while it looks like a really great room because there's a lot of bodies in there, there's a lot of short-term answers in there. Are they going to extend Bateman and Zay? We don't know. My guess right now would be no. I think they would extend Zay and they would let Bate walk and take whatever comp pick they get. Tez is still a question mark. Tylan Wallace is on a 1-year deal, and even if he wasn't, Tylan Wallace is depth.
Yeah.
D-Hop is a 1-year deal, but D-Hop is a guy that you don't want to have to depend on for 17 weeks plus the playoffs. You want to be able to rest him and keep him for the big moments because he is older and he has dealt with little nagging injuries throughout the last few years. And if he gets hurt, then you're right back to the same exact receiving core from last year, minus Nelson Aguilar, right? So I think wide receivers are really sneaky need.
I think so too. And it's a funny conversation, I think, in the room where you like that there's definitely guys who I wouldn't forsake to draft Luther Burden. Like I'm not if Derek Harmon's there, if Barron's there, if Starks is there, if Jahad Campbell's there, if Shamar Stewart's there, even maybe if Donovan Iziraku's there, like I'm probably gonna draft those guys ahead of Burden. But I'm not gonna I don't think I would draft I'm if you're telling me I'm the decision maker and it's my neck on the line, I don't think I could justify drafting one of the guards above Luther Burden. Like I don't think I could do it.
Or safety. I mean, as much as I love Malachi Starks, if I could get Luther Burden in the first and somehow get Andrew Makuba in the third, like I'm doing that. I mean, look at this safety group. You got Malachi Starks, Nick Emmanwore, Xavier Watts, Kevin Winston Jr. You got, I think it's Eric Reed from Penn State. You also have Malachi Moore from Alabama. You have Andrew Makuba. Like there's safeties galore in this draft. You got Sanker from Virginia Tech, who I like a lot. There's so many safeties in this draft.
Yeah.
After Luther Burden, there's a significant drop at wide receiver.
Yeah.
It's Travis Hunter, Ted McMillan, Luther Burden, and then like poof, the floor drops. But now I do like Jalen Royals and I do like Kyle Williams. I do.
Yeah.
But instead of using your third round pick on a receiver, you already got one in the first. Now you can use that on a safety or corner and the defensive interior D line class is so stacked as well because while I would like to have Derek Harmon in the first, there's tons of guys I could get in the second, third round.
Yeah.
Guys like CJ West, guys like Todd Leak Williams from Ohio State, who's a dog. You got guys like Peebles from Virginia Tech. You have the other kid from Oregon who I can't think of his name right now. You have Dion Walker from Kansas.
Yeah.
So many guys that could give you, maybe not quite what Derek Harmon has, but you could get that same. You can get an interior defensive line like Simeon Simeon Barrow Jr., I think it's like a baby Warren Sapp. Like he's really that good. He could play three technique, nose tackle. He could do all of those things. But it's like, how often are you going to get a chance to draft Luther Bird? Last year, I did a way too early mock draft right after the draft was over, and everybody was like, man, I wish we could get Luther Bird. Like, yeah, I'm like, yeah, no way. He's probably going to go top 5, top 10. And now we're talking, he could be there at 27.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? And like you say, I think there are defensive tackles all the way through this draft. There's pass rush upside guys like Shamar Turner, TJ Sanders, Darius Alexander, and you can get like competent run stuffers guys like Alfred Collins when you want to. So, like, I think there's definitely, I would agree with you.
Collins. Love Alfred Collins.
I was but yeah, so I feel like there's a unique opportunity with Burden and a guy who could be, like I said, he's just so criminally misused at Mizzou. And if you can have him spend more time doing, whenever he did something, whenever he was asked to do something that was an NFL route or an NFL type play, you could see the talent. You can see the talent. It's really easy to see, and I just feel like there is a world where he's a flanker or a slot right now, but I would want to see him. Like I've seen his release package, and it's I might not have seen it that often, but I've seen it sometimes. They seem to keep putting him in. They put him in motion all the time and try to get him a free release. And I was like, what? Why? I don't think you need to do that for this guy.
Right.
And so it was interesting, but I do think he's an interesting discussion at that point.
Yeah, Todd Monken would love him. I mean, Todd Monken loves to use Zay in those ways of motioning him and moving him around. And like, if you give him an extra guy that he can do that with, I think that makes a big difference. If we go back to last year when Zay went down, our offense completely changed. The dynamic of the offense changed. And I think it's part of the reason why we lost, because it almost felt like our offensive identity changed when Zay went out of the lineup. Yeah, we still had Bateman, who was really good, but it felt like we couldn't do a lot of the motion stuff and the misdirection stuff without Zay Flowers. So if you get another guy like Luther Burden, you can do multiple things, and if one guy is out, you don't really lose much, and your offense can stay on course and do what it does, right? So Jay Will says, I wouldn't be surprised if we drafted a receiver in the first with the running back class. I wouldn't be surprised if we drafted a running back in the first 3 rounds, especially if they're using DPA. That'd be interesting. All right. So yeah, so Jay Will says, I wouldn't be surprised if we drafted a receiver in the first, and with the running back class, I wouldn't be surprised if we drafted a running back in the first 3 rounds. Yeah, because I mean, do you agree though? Like when Zay went down last year, it felt like the entire dynamic of the offense changed. It felt like even though Derek was still there and Lamar was still there, you still had Bateman, the tight ends. It felt like the dynamic of the offense changed, and it felt like we lost our identity a little bit, because a lot of the misdirection that they like to use to have you flow one way and then they run another way, that was gone because there was no one there to do what Zay can do. And a guy like Luther Burden would give you that.
Absolutely. And I think, a guy like Burden too is a guy who can do some, I want him playing I want him playing a proper receiver position, but he can also do that stuff. If Zay goes down, he can do that stuff like that. He's proven that he can do that stuff. And he's the big thing with Burden, like the thing that you can just count on, like I think he can develop in lots of different areas, but the thing that you can just count on with Burden is the yards after catch, right? He's so good after the catch. But for me, like I said, I just feel like he's a guy who showed me more than enough. He's got that the thing for separation, the thing they teach you at the Scouting Academy for separation is like how does he separate? Does he separate with his athletic ability? Does he separate with his processing, the way he processes the game, his technique? Does he separate with his play strength? I saw him Burden use all three to separate. And he's better in getting out of his. He's much better in his breaks than I thought he would be. Like he's much more precise in his routes than I thought he would be. And I think he's a tough cover for even really highly intelligent corners. So I feel like the guy has a chance to be a really special receiver in the league, and I just don't. I don't. If I'm handicapping it and I look at the grade, I've changed my grading process over the years, and I now have a kind of more formalized grading system that I use. And when I look at my grades, Malik Neighbors was easily the best receiver for me in last year's draft class.
Yep.
Burden is not that far off him with the grade I've given him. Like he's not that far. He's nowhere near as polished in terms of his release game right now because he's not been asked to do it as much. But he's not a million miles away from those top end receivers in last year's class.
No, absolutely not. I agree with you 100% on that. He is he should be talked about a lot more. And I'm kind of he's not being talked about. And I'm not sure why, but in any other draft, he would be the Ravens pick at 27. Yeah. He may not be this year, but if he was, I think Ravens fans should be really excited about that because it's a sneaky need, right? When you think about all the guys who are on 1-year contracts, you don't want to find yourself next year with Zay Flowers and Tez Walker being the only receivers under contract, right? D-Hop will be gone, probably retired. Bateman's going to probably hit the free agency. Tylen will be gone, and then you just look up and you got Tez and Zay. Like I think you need a little bit more insurance just in case, and then also you need to protect yourself just in case D-Hop goes down. He is older. If he can't finish the season or can't play a full 17 games. Then you're right back in the situation you were in the year before, and Tyler Wallace is your number 3. Like you don't want that. So
I think you make a great point on that.
Yeah, if you look at the Eagles game, remember when Bateman went down and Deontay Johnson refused to go into the game? We were completely shorthanded because it was just Zay and Tylen Wallace, right? And that was a big issue. All right, so before we get out of here, I want to ask you a question that I posted on Twitter and got everybody all juiced up. So last night I did a mock draft. Well, last night I did a show, and then a couple of scouts of mine, friends of mine, who brought this up to my attention. They said, okay, looks like Browns are going to go with Travis Hunter at number 2, and hearing that Giants are going to take Carter at number 3. They took Carter out to dinner. One and down on them, looks like that's going to be the pick. And they saying if Carter goes number 3, they're going to immediately shop Kayvon Thibodeau on draft night. So my question to you is the same question I posed out to the Twitter sphere, which is if the Ravens were offered Kayvon Thibodeau in pick 34 for 27, would you do it?
I think it depends on the board at the time at 27.
Okay.
If you're asking me to do it before, probably not. Maybe I would because of what we talked about before, which is that in this scenario here, you've traded back and got Donovan Jackson, who's an immediate starter at guard, and you could potentially have him take over at left tackle in the future if that's what he is when you get him in the building. And I'm as high on Jackson as you are. So in that situation, like it's a free rental. Like it's a free, interesting rental for a year. Like I'd be happy with Jackson at 27. So if you're in that situation, 100% I'm going to do that, I think. I wonder whether the Giants would do it for such a small pick swap.
But your option on the quarterback. So to come up, so if you really look at it this way, they take Carter, which means now they have no use for Thibodeau, who is on the last year of his contract. His 5th-year option has to be picked up by May 1st. So they have until after the draft to decide. So like you said, if nothing else, it's a free rental. It's like we go back 7 spots and we get a free rental of Kayvon Thibodeau for a year.
Yeah.
If Thibodeau comes in and he balls out, extend him.
Yeah.
You've been looking for an edge rusher to pay anyway, so pay him. Right? If he doesn't, then he walks, you get a comp hit.
Yeah.
But you still got, like I said earlier, to me, the difference between a player picked at 27 and a player picked at 34 is like 0.
Yep.
Like you're basically getting the same talent, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to get someone that you probably would have taken at 27.
Yeah.
Just to go back 7 spots. They move up into the first round. They get the fifth year option on quarterback. So it's a win-win, right? They want to get the fifth year option. Think about what we gave up to get Lamar. We gave up 2 second-round picks. We gave up a second-round pick in 18 and 19, right? So essentially, that's what Thibodeau was. Thibodeau's a second-round pick, and basically you get the top pick in the second round at 34, right? And so to me, that's a slam dunk, right?
Yeah.
You go back 7 spots, you get a free year of Kayvon Thibodeau. Let's say you get him in there, you make the trade, you talk to him, and you like, you know what? I'm liking this guy so much. You pick the 5th year option and say, we're just gonna pick it up.
Yeah,
we're gonna pick up the 5th year option, and that way we get 2 years to see what you got.
Yeah, I really like him in this locker room and in this scheme as well. Like I was high on Thibodeau coming out, and I think I think it's a really interesting option and one that I would certainly do in that scenario. And like I said, I think I would consider it even sight unseen in terms of the board. Like I think I'd consider it given everything we've said about what we think this draft class is and how we think it's probably going to play out for the Ravens at 27. It feels like you would probably do it even if you had to do it before you were on the clock.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think this would be something you do on the clock because I think the Giants will want to know if the quarterback they want is there before they trade up. So that gives you even more assurances of knowing who's there, right? Like in this case, Donovan Jackson is still there and probably some other guys. So you trade back and you still get the guy you probably would have taken at 27.
Yeah.
You know, to me, it's a no-brainer.
I think so
to be able to get and then think about this year's pass rush. Like we just talked about, the edge rush class is not that great this year.
No.
The interior D-line class is much better, but the edge rush class, I mean, if you don't get one of the top guys in the first round, like that's a significant dip in the second round, in the third round, the later round. So, yeah, Jay Will says Kayvon grew up a Ravens fan. I agree, he did. He I remember his draft class. He said that he was a Ravens fan growing up because his favorite player was Ray Lewis. Right. So, from a coaching standpoint, I think he'd be great. You got this is always last year, and then if you pick the 5th year option up on him, then next year will be his last year. But if he comes out there and he does what he's capable of doing, which in his second season he had 11.5 sacks. If he comes out and he does that, you pick up the 5th year. I mean, you extend him.
Yeah, 100%.
You know. All right, I'm here. Yeah, so I mean, you pick them up, man. You extend them. I mean, I don't see why not.
No, I would agree with you 100%.
All right, 1 second. Just want to get disconnected. There we go. All right. Yeah, so I mean, I think it'd be. I mean, his upside is much higher than Owe. I got a little bit of pushback by just one person where he felt like, he didn't feel like the juice was worth the squeeze on a 1 year rental. But I'm like, if that 1 year rental gets you to a Super Bowl, who cares? What happens right after this year. I mean, it's what Howie Roseman does all the time, right? He goes out, he gets guys 1 year rentals, and he stacks his roster as stacked as can be, and then he goes wins the championship, and then he moves on for those guys, and he gets another group of guys for a year or two, right? And that's just the way he did it. Like they do it, right? He went out and got Son Reddick, had him for 2 years, moved on. Then he went and got Bryce Huff, and then he won a Super Bowl, and he moves on from Bryce Huff and Sweat and Josh Sweat, and then off we running. He traded a late day 3 pick for DeAndre Swift, and then right next year he moves on from Swift and he gets Saquon Barkley, and then again they win the Super Bowl. So it's about winning now while also having an eye for the future. But I wouldn't worry about next year for Swift. I mean, for Thibodeau, I'll be worrying about how can he make me better now?
Yeah.
How can him, Owe, Van Noy, Ojabo, and all the guys we already have, how can we make that group the best we can? And if Kayvon Thibodeau can do that for a year, who cares? If they're hosting that Lombardi up at the end of the season, no one's going to care about his contract in 2026. They're not.
No.
Like if he signs, he signs. If not, then we draft someone else. But like he'll help you this year for sure.
And that draft you ran there, you come out with the extra edge rusher that we think we need. You come out with a starter at guard, and you come out with a potential starter at corner as well, in Benjamin Morrison. So you
I was going to say that. I see you saw that.
Yeah. So yeah, that would be great. That'd be great.
You get this right here. I mean, you get Donovan Jackson, Benjamin Morrison.
Oh, Makuba as well. I didn't even see Makuba.
And Makuba, right? Like, and you
Kyle
got
Williams.
So the edge rusher, Kyle Williams. I mean, so the edge
play a role.
Who Stutzman? Oh, you like Stutzman?
I like him playing a role. Like I like him. I think the way to replace. Like I think I'm not necessarily like I think I would draft Jahad Campbell if he fell to the Ravens, but like I'm not rooting for them necessarily to draft Schlesinger, even though I really like Schlesinger, because if we don't get a Jahad Campbell, I'd like to mix and match and get role players in the same way that they had last time. Like I would roll with Trenton Simpson, Danny Stutzman playing different snaps when we're playing different matchups. Like I would roll with the way that they rolled it last year, where they sort of had different players playing different snaps according to the matchup that you had.
Absolutely. And then like Ollie Gordon, man, like 2 years ago, Ollie Gordon was the best running back in the country. And like now he's like a perpetual day 3 pick. And I'm like, what happened? Like this dude, the way people view Ashton Genty now is how people looked at Ollie Gordon just 2 seasons ago.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Man.
Todd Robinson is a dog from Nebraska, interior defensive lineman. He's a dog. Emory Jones is one of my favorite tackles. Simeon Burrow. But like I said, if you can get Thibodeau, he's the edge rusher that you were like that you're not going to get in this draft, right? And so you get him here for a year while also getting all the players that you probably would have taken anyway had you not made the trade. So it's like it's a free rental. You get 1 year of Thibodeau along with the same exact draft class that you would have gotten anyway. Yeah, and you get to roll those guys out for a season and see if we can go get a Lombardi. Well, anywho, this has been great. James, listen, man, I love doing this. I can't wait till we meet again. I got to come on your side next time, come on your pod. This was awesome to sit and talk Ravens, talk draft with you. Why don't you tell the people, the viewing audience, right now we got 462 people watching us right now from YouTube, Twitter, UK, United States, across the pond, everywhere. They're all watching right now. We got 463 now viewers, and we have another few people on playback watching us as well. So let everyone know out there know what you got coming up, where they can catch you, where they can find you, and go ahead. Any plugs you got?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And like I would echo that. Just a pleasure talking draft with you. I knew it would be. So I really enjoyed it. Thanks, man. So I've got a draft guide coming out next week. It is up. It's not quite as in depth as previous years, but still pretty in depth and should get you through day 2 in terms of the potential prospects that the Ravens are going to pick and how they fit with the Ravens. That's coming out, as I said, next Thursday. It's well over 50,000 words already, so it's probably in depth if people want to dig into these prospects, and hopefully it's a nice companion to the draft alongside the other great draft guides that come out, like the Beast, which obviously came out yesterday. So look out for that on Thursday. It'll be on my socials at NFL Ogden on X. And at some point, I'll probably get on Blue Sky as well. And you can hear me on UK Ravens Pod every week and also read my stuff on Russell Street Report occasionally too.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. Again, we are 14 days away from the draft, and counting, and it's coming, man. Fast and Furious, and we're ready, right? We're ready. We got you covered. Uh, UK Ravens, James Ogden has you covered for the first 2 days. I got you all 3 days. I mean, if you want to know who that seventh round draft pick from, Idaho State is, just, you know where to find me. We got you covered. Again, sir, thank you so much for coming on today, and can't wait to have you back on. And yeah, go Ravens, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Matt. You too.